Unbelievable energy here, huh?
Orange energy.
Orange energy. Well, it's an honor and a privilege to be with you all here today and get to interview, my closest friend for 20 plus years, Michael Saylor, who obviously needs no introduction, but whose contribution to the Bitcoin community has been nothing short of extraordinary. So thought we would start off kind of at a high level macroeconomic view and talk about what's happening on a macro level with respect to interest rates, currencies, things of that nature, and how it seems to be pushing the whole world into Bitcoin.
You know, I discovered Bitcoin starting around March, April of 2020, and that's because the world came to a grinding halt. Interest rates went to zero. The lockdown shut down the economy everywhere in the world. The planes stopped flying, the ships stopped moving, the cars stopped driving. And I looked at the interest rates at zero, and I thought, this is kind of the same as trying to stop the passage of time. And for about 18 months, the entire economy was kind of frozen and stuck. And then around about a year ago, a bit more than a year ago, the Federal Reserve started raising the short-term interest rates, and they went from 0 to 25 to 50 to 75 to 100, and they went straight up to 500 basis points. And that's the fastest rate of increase in the interest rate in our lifetimes, in our business career. And so I like to think of it as, it's like in Top Gun 2, the movie, where the interest rates were about 250 basis points in the middle of 2018, and then the Fed's flying the plane, and it gets about 180 basis points in about February of 2020, and then it steep dives down to zero, and it buzzes the valley. This is flying the world's economy at zero for about 18 months. And then someone decided that they could go into a 9G lift, and they just started pulling back on the wings of the plane, and they're flying as hard as they can up to 500 basis points. And that's the point at which you either black out or you rip the wings off the airplane, right? And in the movie Top Gun, the pilot started to black out. But we've got the point where the plane is almost about to stall, the plane being the worldwide economy. A lot of people are blacking out. You saw this in the UK about 6 months ago, where the Prime Minister and the head of the Minister of the Exchequer lost their jobs in a matter of weeks because they almost blew up the entire insurance, pension fund, and banking business in the UK. A few months after that, we started ripping the wings off of the banking system in the US, and we saw the failure of Silicon Valley Bank and Silvergate Bank and Signature Bank and First Republic Bank. And so where we are right now is we're getting to the end of that incredible adjustment where the bankers are trying to reverse the excesses of taking interest to zero. And the result is, we know we can't keep raising interest rates much faster, much longer, because we'll just crash the entire US and Western European banking complex. I mean, all the banks are technically insolvent when they raise interest rates that fast because they crash the bonds. So the Western bankers have slowed down that process. Now they're ambivalent. Can they move forward a little bit? Do they have to back off a bit? What's happened in the meantime that people don't notice is when we cranked the interest rates up so fast, we destroyed the value of all the sovereign debt and all the long mid-sized debt in the world. What we're also doing is we're sucking all of the energy out of the developing world currencies. So indirectly, or maybe directly, the interest rate saga has crushed the currencies of Turkey and the currencies of Argentina and the currencies of every developing nation that doesn't have an extremely strong economy. They're all collapsing right now. So where are we in the macro cycle? We're at the point where the inflation hasn't really gone away. It's backed off of the most extremes, but we still have inflation in excess of the interest rate. we can't really keep raising interest rates without destroying all of our allies' currencies. And we can't raise interest rates without destroying a lot of the Western banks and pension funds and the rest of the bond complex. So the political pressure is going to grow on the banking community to stop raising rates. But of course, they're going to want the inflation to go away. And they're going to want to save all of these other developing nations. So I would expect the logical thing to happen now is all the economists will start to redefine inflation. And so instead of hearing CPI, you're gonna see other inflation measures that we want to focus on. They're going to redefine the measure. They're going to make adjustments to the market basket of goods and services in the inflation metric. So we're going to take out expensive items and put cheap items into the index so that the CPI looks lower. And you're going to start to see new novel financial instruments like swaps, where we're simply going to swap billions or hundreds of billions of dollars for hundreds of billions of dollars of another currency. It'll be an off-balance sheet adjustment. And all of these things will be meant to massage the macroeconomic problem. We'll be trying to support other currencies. We'll be trying to keep our bonds from crashing. We'll be trying to make the inflation look lower. We're going to renormalize. So instead of 2% inflation, maybe it'll be 3% is normal. And instead of 3% of inflation defined 10 years ago, it'll be 3% of the new inflation metric that we just came up with, because this is the proper one, because the world is different today and technology is different. And of course, pretty soon you'll have ad-financed YouTube videos in the CPI, because that's a little bit easier metric to manage. So I think we're at that cycle where the money printing is going to continue. We're going to have more of a delamination between monetary inflation and asset inflation, and producer price inflation and CPI inflation and the general inflation rate. And politicians and bankers are going to struggle to hold it all together with a lot of novel new programs and new ideas.
Okay. I think that's a great backdrop for the next topic I want to talk about. Everywhere we've gone for the last week, everybody has wanted to ask about your views on what's happening on the regulatory front. The SEC has come out quite strong against a number of large crypto players. And so I thought it would be helpful to chat a little bit about what your views are on how this impacts Bitcoin, both in the short term as well as the long term.
Yeah, well, Bitcoin's a rabbit hole, and when you start going down the rabbit hole, first you have to learn all about Bitcoin, and then you have to learn all about the block size wars. And then you have to learn about the history of the crypto industry. And somewhere along the way, I started studying Gary Gensler. I took his class at MIT. I went back and I watched every minute of 20 lectures at MIT. And then I started reading everything written by anybody. And as you know, I read all the lawsuits. I read the CFTC lawsuit. I read the Bittrex lawsuit. I read the Coinbase lawsuit, the Binance lawsuits, all of the legal judgments. And I listen to all the congressional testimony, like every minute, like everything that every congressperson or every senator has said about Bitcoin for the past 3 years.
This is true.
And then I talk to you about it. Okay, and so here's my opinion, right? First of all, in the beginning, there was Bitcoin, and it was good. And there was a unit of account, and it was called BTC. And there was a network that could not be censored, and it was called Bitcoin. And then along came smart people that learned about Bitcoin, and they arrived to fix Bitcoin. I just heard about Bitcoin. I'm here to fix Bitcoin. And they divided into two factions. There are the people that heard about Bitcoin and wanted to help Bitcoin the hard way. And they worked on Lightning, and it took years from 2015, and they're still working on it 6, 7, 8 years later. And they worked on Bitcoin applications, and they worked on Bitcoin companies, and they worked very hard to raise millions and tens of millions and hundreds of millions and billions of dollars to buy Bitcoin. That's the hard way. And those people are in this room, and they're in the Bitcoin ecosystem, and that's Bitcoin enlightening and Bitcoin maximalists and people that believe Bitcoin. It's the Samson Mows and the Adam Backs and it's the Elizabeth Starks and the Jack Mahlers and the Jack Dorseys, and you know who they are. And it's hard work. It takes a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of bleeding. Then there's another group of people that heard about Bitcoin and they wanted to fix it. And they took the easy way. And the easy way is a few shortcuts. It was, I want to make money by copying Bitcoin. I want to compete with Bitcoin with a new token. I want to bank Bitcoin. I want to rehypothecate Bitcoin. I want to loan you money on Bitcoin. I want to generate yield on Bitcoin. I want to run a Bitcoin exchange. I want to offer you Bitcoin derivatives, and I want to create every other flavor of Bitcoin. And I got the new Bitcoin, the quantum-resistant Bitcoin, and the energy-efficient Bitcoin, and the faster and more beautiful Bitcoin with the crypto kitties on it. Okay, that's the other set, okay? That's crypto. Now, what's going on right now is that and I wanted to create the US dollar on a crypto rail, and I'm gonna give you Bitcoin without volatility. And I'm gonna give you a network, a crypto network that clears in 1 second, which is cheap and free. So what you see with the regulation right now is the regulators are saying, we're not comfortable with the stable coin. We're not comfortable with the crypto exchange. We're not comfortable with the crypto token. We're not comfortable with the shortcuts. We don't want you to do an ICO. We don't want a corporate coin. And the result of all of that is the crypto ecosystem, which in the beginning was Bitcoin, and then bifurcated into all these other things, is going to come back together and unify on Bitcoin again. And what we're going to see is that instead of the unit account being the dollar, and instead of the network being a crypto exchange offshore, now the unit of account is going to be BTC. And the crypto network is going to be Bitcoin. And if you want a fast Bitcoin network, a fast payment network, it's not going to be a crypto exchange. It's not going to be a proof of stake token. It's going to be Lightning. And the gas is going to be Satoshis. And everything is going to anchor into Bitcoin. So this is a very painful time period for the crypto industry. And you can read it on the news. But it's a very expensive, painful, difficult, educational episode where people that believed in Bitcoin, but then went off to do all of their other altcoin experiments and crypto experiments, they're going to realize that there was a reason that you might want a censorship-resistant network that spit out a block every 10 minutes. They're going to realize that there's a reason for a mining network that spits out 400 exahash of digital power. They're going to realize that there's a benefit to working really long and hard for many, many years to do a Lightning type network. They're going to realize that these things they took for granted, they thought, we can just have our cake and eat it too. We can have a decentralized network that has the dollar as the unit of account. We can move the money at the speed of light for free. And we don't really need to use energy and mining ASICs and Bitcoin. And we don't have to pay for Bitcoin for gas. We'll just issue our own yo-yo coin and we'll use that for gas. And I think that those people are going to realize that Bitcoin is the safe haven asset. Bitcoin is the risk-off asset. Bitcoin is the censorship-resistant network, right? Bitcoin is the reserve asset of the ecosystem. And that means that as they lose confidence in their tokens, they're going to trade their tokens back into the reserve asset of the ecosystem, which is Bitcoin. When they lose confidence in an offshore or an onshore crypto exchange, they're going to trade back into Bitcoin. When they lose confidence, when they think that, well, that's not censorship resistant anymore, right? Those are all nation state captured networks. They're going to go back to Bitcoin. And so I actually think that this is reminding everybody why Satoshi did what Satoshi did. It's going to bring everybody back to their roots. And as people lose confidence in all of these other crypto ideas, which were meant to make Bitcoin better or fix Bitcoin, right? And I'll give people a benefit of the doubt. They're trying to fix Bitcoin, but they're taking shortcuts. Or maybe it was their business, right? I'm going to be in the business of trading Bitcoin, rehypothecating Bitcoin, hedging Bitcoin, creating competitors to Bitcoin, improving Bitcoin. That was their business. I think that they're going to realize that, in fact, the best idea always was to buy and hold Bitcoin, take the long view, and if you see an issue, if you see something that is suboptimal, like I want to pay for a cup of coffee in a split second for free, if you can't do that with Bitcoin, you don't reinvent the ecosystem. You go back and you focus on creating either a layer 2 or a layer 3 solution on top of Bitcoin, and you solve the problem via Lightning or solve the problem by a custodial Bitcoin wallet. And so ultimately, the capital in the crypto ecosystem is going to migrate from the other crypto assets to Bitcoin. As people lose confidence, as they get fearful about all these other crypto assets and crypto exchanges, they're going to go to the thing they know, the thing they trust. And the truth of the matter is, as Eric, as you've told me many times, the crypto people don't dislike Bitcoin. They actually like Bitcoin. They just thought that there might be another way and there might be another possibility. And now they realize that Bitcoin is the way. And
there's no second best.
There is no second best. The exchanges will simplify. They will go from trading hundreds of tokens or thousands of tokens or tens of thousands of ideas, and they will simplify and they will consolidate. The ones that are going to last are going to focus on Bitcoin, right? They're going to realize that. The investors are going to realize they should focus on Bitcoin. The technologists, whatever their ideas, fast payments, DeFi, some token, any kind of security thing, they're going to focus on Bitcoin. They're going to focus on Bitcoin, Lightning. There'll be an explosion of interest in protocols. The VC are going to move over from crypto tokens, with Solana named as a security, with Cardano named as a security, with all these other 15, 20, 30 tokens named as securities. The VC in Silicon Valley are going to say, wow, what was that thing about Bitcoin? And what was that Lightning? You mean I can do this on Bitcoin with Satoshis? And you're going to see the VCs move over to Bitcoin and Lightning. You're going to see a renaissance of development on Bitcoin. You're going to see an acceleration of Lightning. You're going to see an expansion. And all of this is, in essence, a massive educational campaign to teach politicians the difference between Bitcoin and an ethical commodity and a security. And you can see it. It's like the senator says Bitcoin, the governor says Bitcoin, the congressperson says Bitcoin, the regulator says Bitcoin, 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 Bitcoin. And all of these lawsuits, and I have read thousands and thousands of pages. There's one word conspicuously missing from all of the thousands of pages, and that one word is Bitcoin, okay? So bottom line, right, it's bumpy. It's a turbulent transition. It's a rationalization of the industry. The industry's growing up, but it's long-term good for Bitcoin. And I think you can expect a lot of the crypto bros that got distracted. Maybe they took off their laser eyes. Maybe they loved Bitcoin between 2010 and 2016. I think they're coming back to Bitcoin from 2023 to 2030, and you're going to see there's going to be an avalanche of people returning to the fold, building on top of Bitcoin, and they're going to rediscover the roots of the crypto revolution, right? That the whole idea of cryptography, decentralization, an asset without an issuer, right? And that is what's going on right now. It's going to educate the politicians. It's going to educate the mainstream media. Watch CNBC. They get it. Watch Bloomberg. They get it. Read Wall Street Journal and New York Times. They get it. And so I follow all you guys on Twitter. And I remember when I first got in this space in 2020, people said, when will the mainstream media talk about us? Nobody talks about us. Nobody talks about Bitcoin. Nobody talks about any of this. And then for a while, they talked about a lot of stuff, and it was very confusing, and it was very scary, and it was unclear whether there's a difference between Bitcoin and FTT token. And now they're talking about us, but it's very clear, like Bitcoin is a commodity, this other stuff is uncertain, right? And Andrew Ross Sorkin says, tell me what you think about Bitcoin. And so I think that this has been, it's a catalytic experience. It's cathartic for the crypto community. I think we should welcome them back with open arms when they're ready to return to the fold. But meanwhile, Bitcoin is going to continue to motor forward. We have all of the people rehypothecating and shorting Bitcoin, they're all bankrupt. If you thought it was a good idea to loan your Bitcoin to someone so they could short it, you probably lost your Bitcoin. Everyone in the business of shorting Bitcoin, they're all fallen, right? Everybody that embraced the altcoins as being equal to Bitcoin, they're realizing that was a bad business idea. I think it takes a while for the market to work out these issues, but the law of thermodynamics will not be denied. And Bitcoin is the technically superior asset. It is the economically superior asset. And it is the ethically superior asset, you know? And believe it or not, the vast majority of the disinterested population around the world will eventually, given enough time and information, realize that. And they are realizing that. And that's what's happening in front of your face. It's not pretty. It's not pleasant. But this is the way that Bitcoin rises above the noise and establishes its dominance as the world's greatest crypto asset network.
So, yeah. So we've got a macroeconomic landscape where nation states and central banks are doing their best to destroy the purchasing power of 8 billion people in the world, pushing people into Bitcoin. We've got a regulatory environment that you've just eloquently described as being very good for Bitcoin, certainly in the long term. I think the title of our chat here is The Investment Case for Bitcoin. So let's get a little more granular, talk about that. Take it any direction you like, whether you want to talk about different products or the different investment groups, whether it's individuals, family offices, corporations. What are your thoughts on the investment case for Bitcoin?
Well, I think people are losing confidence in technology investments and in stock and equity investments right now. If you look at the performance of the S&P and the NASDAQ and most conventional companies, they've hit a wall. And so investors in the equity market are scratching their head and they're increasingly fearful. They've got high interest rates, they've got inflation, they've got regulation, they've got trade barriers. So they're looking around. The commercial real estate market took off in 2020 because interest rates went to zero, and so the cap rates of these companies were extraordinary, and the multiples on commercial real estate were extreme. And there's always like a 3-year lag. Like you and me, we sit around our pool in March of 2020 and we go, oh my, these commercial office buildings are going to be empty. Who's going to want this space? Well, it takes 3 years for people to go, wow, commercial occupancies are low. Who wants the space? So sometimes you don't really want to know 3 years in advance, or at least you got to think about it. But I think investors are getting disenchanted with real estate. They're getting disenchanted with equity. They're getting concerned. I mean, the entire commodity thing is a concern. Commodities don't work, and they're realizing that that's a challenge. So they're also losing confidence, right, in their ownership of these properties, right? You've seen so many people had their assets seized or frozen, and that's continuing. So Bitcoin is emerging, A, as digital gold, B, its proposition is gold is stronger than ever because gold has not performed at all in 2.5 years, and Bitcoin is beating every asset class in the same time period. So the gold hypothesis or thesis is much stronger. Bitcoin as digital property is much stronger. The idea that I could buy $1 million worth of Bitcoin and move it anywhere in the world is becoming appealing to people as they start to struggle with property taxes, and they know there's going to be an increase in tax over time. So Bitcoin has emerged as a digital commodity better than gold, as a digital property better than commercial real estate. It's emerging as an alternative to people that have seen their residential property monetized, and it's also emerging as a world's monetary index, because as the regulators differentiate between Bitcoin and everything else, right? As they hammer over and over and over again, Bitcoin is an asset without an issuer. It is unique. As that happens, right, the significance of Bitcoin being that green ticker in the lower right corner of a CNBC, television episode or newscast, or Bitcoin being at the top of the masthead of the Wall Street Journal every day, right? That's sending a message to the world. This is the world's global monetary index. In fact, this is the greatest of the world's global monetary indexes. And I think Bitcoin has successfully morphed from being speculative, scary, digital asset to legitimate monetary index, legitimate monetary asset everywhere in the world. And, we've talked about this before. I think that if you get people to acknowledge that Bitcoin is an asset with a period, then Bitcoin 10x's from here. Like, we don't really have to conclude anything else. I have my hierarchy of investors. It's like a 5-part hierarchy. Okay, here are Bitcoin investors. There's the Bitcoin denier, like the Peter Schiff. Bitcoin is tulips. It doesn't exist. It's a scam, right? Ever. The Bitcoin deniers have actually been discredited, right? They've not got no credibility left. When the head of the CFTC, the SEC, the White House, Congress, Senate, the Treasury, the head of the central banks of Europe and the United States, when the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, when CNBC, when they all acknowledge Bitcoin as an asset, the deniers just look silly. So the deniers have kind of been silenced. Now you've got the skeptics. Skeptics are those that say, oh, Bitcoin, it's an asset. It may be digital gold. It's too good to be true. So the government will ban it. Like, follow me that again. It's really good. It's so good that the government's going to ban it. That's the skeptic, right? They're not denying. They're just saying, well, someone's going to take it away from you. Okay, well, that was a very loud refrain 3 years ago. And you heard that from bankers and from big investors. You've even heard it 2 years ago and 1 year ago. But if you're reading the 10,000 pages of lawsuits right now, and if you're looking what's going on in Congress and the Senate, it's pretty obvious they're not taking it away from you guys, right? At the end of the day, the one thing that the regulators everywhere in the world are trying to tell you is if you operate a crypto exchange, you can sell and buy Bitcoin. That's what they're trying to tell you. Bitcoin is good, it's ethical, it's an asset without an issuer, it's real, it's an innovation. We don't know what we think of it, but it is tangible. So the skeptics are actually proven wrong as well. And now we move to the last 3 categories. The investor, the technocrat, and the maximalist. Investors are people that say, Bitcoin's a digital asset. I think maybe I'll buy some, maybe I'll short it. It's correlated to the NASDAQ. No, it's uncorrelated to the NASDAQ. No, it's negatively correlated to the NASDAQ. They're like traders, they change their mind, but if they acknowledge that it's something, then they need 1% of it. Okay, we're actually seeing a migration, and a lot of people are coming on board as investors and traders, and that's not a bad thing, that's a good thing. I think the regulators and the mainstream media are doing a great job of orange pilling Bitcoin investors, and this is maybe the first and greatest asset class, since the creation of the S&P 500, right? And since the creation of the S&P index or the Vanguard index, right? This is the biggest thing for them. So, yeah, we like investors. The technocrat is what I was with regard to Apple in 2009. If you'd asked me, I said, Apple's going to be a digital monopoly, a mobile monopoly. They're going to crush everybody. They're going to get 1 billion users. They're going to make huge amounts of money. The stock's going to go up by a factor of 10. Okay, if you believe that Microsoft is going to own the business software market and Google's going to own the search market and Apple's going to own the mobile market, then you're a technocrat, a techno investor. And pretty much every obscenely rich person that you know in this world was a technocrat. The Mark Zuckerbergs, the Larry Pages, the Sergey Brins, the Steve Jobs, all of them, the Zuckerbergs, the Jeff Bezos of the world, they're technocrats, right? A lot of people made a lot of money being a technocrat. And so if you believe if you understand Bitcoin and you're a technocrat, what you say is, Bitcoin is the world's dominant digital monetary network. That's what Cathie Wood just said on CNBC just today to Andrew Ross Sorkin. She said, hey, it's the world's greatest global monetary network and the first, and it's going to go to $600,000 to $1 million a coin. That's our base case. Technocrat. And then she went on to say, yeah, we like Tesla. We like technology, right? That's okay. Those people are great. Warren Buffett eventually bought Apple Computer. Carl Icahn eventually bought Apple Computer, right? Those people, once they buy, they'll hold. I started out as a technocrat, and I think anybody that understands technology says, well, it's 95% of the proof of work in the world, maybe more. It's absolutely dominant. The next closest thing is 1%. So it doesn't take a stretch to say, Bitcoin is the digital monetary network destined to provide a digital monetary network to billions and billions and billions of people in the next 1 to 2 decades. And on that basis, it should go up by a factor of 100. And we're winning those people. We're going to get them. But the last type of investor is the maximalist. Okay, and here's my definition of maximalist. Jack Dorsey said, Bitcoin is an instrument of economic empowerment. I heard those words. They stuck with me my entire life. When I first bought Bitcoin, I said, it's the world's greatest digital gold network. It's going to be better than Apple Computer. But when I heard Jack Dorsey speak, I said, Bitcoin is an instrument of empowerment for 8 billion people. It's an ethical good. It's a utilitarian entitlement to all 8 billion people in the world. It gives property rights, it gives freedom, it gives a hope of sovereignty. That's a little bit better than the value proposition of Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft, which I like. But at the end of the day, if you believe that Bitcoin is an instrument of empowerment, then you're a maximalist. Right? People don't, when I owned Apple stock, I didn't think it was going to cure half of the ills in the world and provide property rights to everybody in China or Africa. I just thought it was a really good investment with a technology lever, so much leverage it was unstoppable. I said it's unstoppable. Like Amazon's unstoppable, like Google's unstoppable, like Bitcoin is unstoppable. However, the difference with Bitcoin is it's not just unstoppable, right? It's inevitable, and it's ethical. And so for that reason, I think it's the most important thing I've ever done. And you don't have to be disinvested from everything else in your life. You can own a building, own Apple stock. You can believe in supporting your local mayor. You can actually own farmland in Kansas, and you can actually mine for silver, or you can run a natural gas well, and you can still be a Bitcoin maximalist. Right? What differentiates Bitcoin maximalists is say, this is not just an unstoppable digital network. This is an ethical imperative. And if you believe it's an ethically good thing, then you become as passionate as Jack Dorsey is, as everybody in this room is, right, as I am. And I think that ultimately is what differentiates the decision to support Bitcoin from the decision to support gold or natural gas or oil or any given corporate stock or invest in a building. Those are just mercenary investments, but this is a mission.
I love that definition because it's... I love that definition of Bitcoin maximalist because it's so inclusive. And I think there's often a perception that Bitcoin maximalism is anything but inclusive. So I think that's great. In addition to that, there's this kind of feeling that there is this strong ideology around Bitcoin, which this role of financial empowerment kind of permeates our industry. And that ideology can be viewed, some people think it's zealotry and has religious connotations to it. Others just think it's an ideology. What are your thoughts on the ideological components of Bitcoin?
I think Bitcoin is definitely an ideology. It's a superior ideology. If you believe in the application of mathematics and physics and the laws of thermodynamics to the world of economics and politics and human behavior, then you believe in Bitcoin. I don't think you have to apologize for that. There was a time when Galileo said, I think that the earth moves around the sun. And I observed that because of science and experimentation. And people thought that was a religious belief, but it was just an ideology grounded in science. And I think that everything that's beautiful in this world, right? The planes that fly, the trains that move, the ships that float, that don't sink, right? The electricity, the fire, these are all based on physics, and they're based on thermodynamics. And if you believe in the cult of fire and the cult of electricity and the cult of sailing power and ships that float and don't sink, then you believe in ideology. But it's an ideology rooted in mathematics and rationale and physics. And I think that the Bitcoin community is passionate, but it's because we want physics and we want mathematics to be applied to money and to be applied to property rights and be applied to politics and be applied to economics. And for the first time in human history, we have the technology to bring physics and mathematics and thermodynamics to economics. And for everyone that doesn't understand that they may view that as an ideology and a bit scary. But the answer to that is we just have to educate the world. Because once they understand that there are physics that we use to fly our airplanes and build our skyscrapers and make our mobile phones work and heat our homes, and those physics can also be used to make our economies work better and make everyone's life better. I think that people will embrace that technology, and then they'll realize that, Bitcoin maximalists are no more religious zealots than Galileo or Isaac Newton were when they proposed certain scientific and mathematical ideas to make the world a better place.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head there with we've got to educate the world, and the contribution that you've made through your podcast and your colorful metaphors and explanations of how to educate the world on Bitcoin has been nothing short of extraordinary. So on behalf of everyone, thank you for that. I think we're out of time, but thank you.